This is The Final Word, just The Final Word, the weekly show with Jeff Lemon and Adam Collins, coming to you from the kitchen table in London, sitting around because we have a couple of days where we don't have to travel, a couple of days before I'll be off to wherever it is, Bristol maybe, for the Women's Ashes ODIs. We've got Women's Ashes stuff coming up on the show. We've got India going to the Caribbean for their test tour. We've got Afghanistan beating Bangladesh in their white ball series. We've got World Cup qualifier stuff to update where we were up to last week. And critically, we have a live show confirmed, Adam, for London.
We do, yeah. People keep saying to me, day off, no day 5. I'm like, where I'm working relentlessly. No, I'm not complaining.
More time to do podcasts.
And I'm doing Surrey the next 3 days as well. The Surrey-Nottinghamshire County Championship games, days 2, 3 and 4 at the Oval.
Sorry.
Just another version of a busy week. But no, in a way, I am glad we got to drive home last night, as we did with Jeremy. The great man Jeremy Vernon-Coney and Jared Kimber in the back seat as well. I especially liked how we started the day with Jeremy doing a chat GBP. Is that how it's pronounced? GPT, sorry, shows how in touch I am with AI.
GBP is Great British Pounds.
True, that's true. I should know that.
Chat GBP would be a good name for a money segment.
Yeah. Maybe, yes. I saw the finance specialist was on View from the Boundary on TMS the other day. Maybe he can run a segment called Chat GBP and I can invoice him for it. No, he started the day with a rap that was inspired by Chat GPT. And ended the day listening to the entirety of Is This It, the Strokes' seminal debut album from 2001, which was quite the experience, with him kind of half singing along when he kind of picked up the choruses and so on.
Well, this is Jeremy Coney's a very curious man. He's a polymath. He's interested in all kinds of artistic and creative things. So
he's also a music man.
He is a music man, and so there was just a sort of automated algorithm thing spooling music, and he kept asking me, "What's this? Who's this?" And I was like, "Well, I don't actually know." So I thought I'll put on something that I do know. And he was getting very into it. You know, we were going through some of that early 2000s indie stuff, some Block Party as well. Yep. He was getting into a bit of Silent Alarm. And he was drumming on the dashboard, and he was he wasn't singing the lyrics, but he was singing the harmonies. He was harmonising with the main vocal lines.
I love doing that with him too. I've spent a lot of time in cars with Jeremy, and I like putting on Beatles songs with harmonies. He knows every Beatles album back to front. You put on a Beatles song, he knows all the harmony bits and chooses to go there. It's a lot of fun. He's a great man. But yeah, we all got back to London pretty late last night, and have all regrouped today. And that's why we're here. And as you mentioned before, we have been able to, through this busy Monday, sort out the live show once and for all. So the big reveal: Stephen Finn is back to go again. We had Finny do the Final Word live with us
in Adelaide.
Last Ashes series, wasn't it?
Adelaide
2021.
It's weird that we were in Adelaide because they've never played a test match there, so I don't know why we were all there, but we were.
No, it's inside joke from you there, Jeff, for our dedicated Final Nerds. Speaking of our Final Nerds, they will get a heavily discounted ticket, won't they? We've arranged all of this.
Yeah, so the show is at the Phoenix, which is a pub just next to Oxford Circus. It's as central London can be. It'll be the 26th, which is the night before the test. It'll be 7 for 7:30. There'll be a ticket link going live, and if you sign up on Patreon, you get a half price ticket if you want to come along.
And that'll be via an offer code. So what we're going to do in the next little while is, well, first of all, if you're listening to this now, it's a little bit like that Pauline Hanson video. If you're watching this now, I have been assassinated. If you're listening to this now, the ticket link will be live by then. I think it already is actually. And the offer code will be sent to all of our patrons in a log post. Mm-hmm. And that gets you a 15 quid ticket instead of the full freight, which is 30 quid. Finny's an awesome live guest as well. Adelaide, it was a heap of fun. So it'll be wonderful to share that experience with our listeners who are over in the UK for the Ashes night before an Oval Test match that, with any luck, will be live. By that I mean the series will still be live as we head into the final test of what is already shaping up as the most memorable Ashes as well. We debated this on the Daily Show yesterday. Since 05, maybe possibly. Well, certainly since, but equal to 05. If we get that far, it will be.
It's also the shows in conjunction with the Lord's Taverners, who do a lot of great charitable work using cricket as their vehicle. So you'll be able to find out more about them there. You'll be able to sign up to get more information about the Lord's Tavs and the projects that they're doing.
Yeah, that's it. This is a really nice tie-in. So the Lord's Tavs are going to be all around this in terms of setting it up. They're selling the tickets for us, which is really good of them. There's ways of donating to the Tavs as part of the ticket buying process. But yeah, it works really nicely. So If you haven't already, please share your data with the tab, sign up to their email newsletter, which is how I found out about the Edinburgh Marathon and Half Marathon. That's an event we're going to be doing next year. We're back in Edinburgh playing a cricket game with the tabs on the 23rd of August. A bunch of us are going up there for that. I'd love more players. If you want to go to Edinburgh with me and with others from the Final Word and play 2 games of cricket on the 22nd and 23rd of August during the Fringe, that is something you can do. All you need to do is get in touch with me and I'll sort the rest out. But crucially, email me, finalwordcricket@gmail.com, or send me a message in all the other usual places.
Now, just before we jump onto the women's Ashes stuff with the one days coming up.
I was going to do one more thing on the live show. Can I get one more? You know what, don't worry about it. Sorry, don't worry about it. All good.
Okay. What?
It doesn't matter. I was going to talk about the fact that this is where I take Winnie to go to those discos downstairs in the basement, but I can do it another time.
That's all right. Let me just... I need to edit that.
Isn't DC...
I need to do the video.
Oh, we're putting the whole video out, the whole episode. So I misunderstood that.
We'll do the segments. We're doing the video like I did last week.
Okay, all right.
Last week I put the whole thing up in segments.
In segs. Yeah, okay, cool.
Right. Before we get to the women's Ashes stuff, a topic dear to our hearts: overrates. Overrates in Test cricket. Now, we talked a lot about overrates on day 3, and then my favourite sort of idiot comment on the day 4 show was, "Oh, I didn't talk about the overrate, did you?" No, we didn't talk about the overrate because England won the Test match, and so we were talking about them winning the Test match, as opposed to the day before when 25 overs were bowled and there wasn't so much to talk about.
When 20.1 overs were bowled in 156 minutes, we were talking about it. Funny that.
Yeah, because there was also time to talk about it because of the lack of other things that had happened because of the slow overrate. So one of our favourite things to talk about on this show, though, is overrate. Joke's on you. So England, Australia, they're both in the dock for points deductions. They're likely to lose, is it 13 points for the slow overrates in the Test match, in the Lord's Test?
Lords and Edgbaston for Australia. So 13 points is more than a win in the WTC context, where you get 12. So Australia are going to fight this. They're going to take it to the ICC. Part of their argument, according to Pete Lawler, is going to be that bowling 90 overs in a day, even with all of the allowances, isn't possible, and they're going to argue it on structure, according to the report in the Oz, which is interesting. England are saying, well, Ben Stokes said explicitly to the umpires the other day, when apparently this was raised in that ridiculous Saturday afternoon session, do you see the people complaining? It's not the point, Ben. It's not the point. It's the playing conditions are that you play 90 overs a day. You don't get to just change them on the hoof because the crowd are enjoying themselves.
And if you want to change it, if you want to say we should only bowl 80, then make the case through the ECB and go to the ICC and get the playing conditions changed.
But that's where we're going to land, right?
Right.
Yeah, just to be clear, just so we all know what's happening here, it'll be 80 over Test cricket very soon.
Right.
That's the trajectory, right? Because we're already at, Andrew Sampson crunched this for us a year or two ago. We're already losing 5 or 6 a day. They'll go, we'll just make it easier. We'll make it 80 a day. There'll be an uproar for 5 minutes, like there was when there were numbers put on the shirts. Like everyone got very angry about that for a couple of minutes and then moved on with life. So it'll be here. Test cricket will get reduced, I'm certain.
And the rhythm of it will change because you won't have, say, 10 overs with the new ball at the end of the day.
All of that, yeah. I've got no doubt that that's what we're going to get to, because they're not going to extend the playing hours. Even though we did extend playing hours momentarily when 4-day Test cricket was playing 98 overs per day. Remember that? Remember the whole idea, the whole conceit of 4-day Test cricket was you only lose half a day because you build in an extra half an hour or an extra 2 hours across 4 days beforehand with overs. They didn't even bother with that fallacy ahead of the Ireland Test match the other week. It was 4 days of 90 overs. But I mean, sure.
They didn't get through the 90.
We could extend the playing hours by another 30 minutes to give them another 30 to get the 90 in, but the players won't cop that. So we end up in this ongoing debate. But this will actually hurt. So England, again, according to Lawler, aren't paying their fines. Shock horror. Like, of course they're not paying their fines, as if the players really pay the fines to the ICC when they're not even the ones paying them the match fees, like as if. Because it's a deduction of the match fee, right?
Right.
And the match fee comes from the host board.
Sure.
It doesn't come from the ICC.
No. And so the host board can say, well, here's a deduction of your fee, and then at the end of the year they can be like, by the way, here's a bonus for unrelated reasons.
Yeah,
it's the same amount.
It's a nonsense.
I'll tell you what, if they actually, so the Australian players get 20 grand AUD for one Test match. So across a team, that's $220,000 if the whole team gets fined 100% of their match fee. Imagine if that money got donated to an associate country. A lot of the associates are on about 60 grand, 70 grand a
Sure,
year. That's
sure.
that's their entire operating budget. You know, some of the wealthier ones might get a couple of 100,000. You know, if the money from the fines was actually collected and was repurposed in a way like that, then it might actually be useful and achieve something.
Yeah, well, look, at least this is going to provide a disincentive to take the piss, because both of these sides, well, England are, quite rightly are frustrated about the fact that they caught fire after they'd lost so many test matches in the WTC cycle, they couldn't make the final, right? And Australia suffered back in 2021 from their slow overrate deduction, albeit I think that was 2 points, was enough to 4 points, sorry, was enough to tilt it. Well, I'll tell you what, 13, that's an entire test match plus lost, and England should get a considerable deduction of WTC points from what they did on Saturday, and there'll be other instances in this Leeds test match. So, yeah, there is an ongoing conversation. Some people will always complain about us complaining about it, and that's fine. They think that things are, players should play to the rhythm they wish to, and it's all about the overall product and the end products. But really, this is about having a set of playing conditions that the players adhere to, not just when they see fit to do so.
Yeah, well, like I said, you can make that argument if you make the argument that the rules should be permanently changed, that you don't need to bowl 90 overs. If you have a rule that says you have to bowl 90 overs, then you have to bowl 90 overs.
Yeah, or be punished accordingly.
Yeah.
And as I said many times, in county cricket there is a way of managing this. You still bowl your overs and you get fined.
Yep.
That is to say, you bowl your overs and you lose your county championship points. So you don't get anything, But in Test cricket, we've got the hard cut-off. That's a broadcasting thing. I get that, but anyway.
In Test cricket, I think literally the only way is to start taking players off the field when you're buying the overrate.
I think I actually think there is one other way. It's in play. It's in innings, or end of innings, I should say. Penalty runs. We have penalty runs levied for other things, other stuff in the game now. It's not.
But there are periods where that won't matter. If the team's 500 ahead, then 10 penalty runs, 20 penalty runs won't affect them. So
true.
You need something
true.
that actively affects play for everybody in the moment at every period of time.
So like T20 with the circle fielders.
Yeah, you're 1 over behind, you lose a fielder. You're 2 overs, you lose 2. Whatever.
Yeah, whichever side has been deemed responsible for the loss of overs, remembering that it's occasionally the batting team, I think should pay with 10 runs per over. At the end of the innings and done via penalty runs. So the umpires and the match referee would have to make that assessment 4 times a match.
Which they never do, because they always end a test match and then say, oh, this team was 4 overs behind, when in fact that team was 43 overs behind.
Yeah.
And they somehow make ways to cover for them, because all of the match referees are former players. And that seems to be where their sympathies lie. Anyway, let's get off overrates and let's get on to the Women's Ashes, which is spicily set up. Australia losing their first bilateral T20 series for 6 years. That was the India one, wasn't it, from memory? That when India came over and beat Australia in Australia.
No, they lost the T20s in Australia against England in 17 in the Women's Ashes. So England won the 2 in Canberra to win 2-1. But yeah, it's still a long time ago.
Yeah,
it's a long time ago. It's before Australia.
So they lost 2 in, because that was earlier in 17, wasn't it?
That was in early 16. That was early 16. But your point is right. India did win a T20 series against Australia then. But this is all before the pay deal. And I think that's really important to remember. Everything changed for Australian women's cricket in terms of turbocharging their performances after the MOU in the middle of 17, which kicked in the following year. And that's also after the T20 World Cup, the 50 over World Cup in 17, where they are effectively unbeatable from 2018 onwards. So there are moments in time, and for the Australian women, that loss of a series in 2017 is significant, which is what makes this quite interesting to me. I never would have thought. What did I say before the T20 World Cup on the podcast? That if you were to simulate it, that Australia would win that tournament 97 times. Well, if you were to simulate a T20 bilateral series with England, maybe it's not so clear cut there, but they might win it 89 times. And this is one of the 11, to pick arbitrary numbers, where England have gotten up. Yeah,
well, they have got up. They made their biggest score against Australia in the first game, 189 for 9, which you would have noticed if you listened to the Daily Show. That we've had some help from Henry Moran, Melissa Story, Alex Hartley have been chipping in there, which has been great. Danny Wyatt's been on fire at the top, made 76 in that game and made quick runs as well in the other game when they had a reduced overs target, 14 overs when they were chasing in the second game. England, she made a fast 26 wide to get them off and running. So they beat Australia. They just held Australia short the first time, and then they ran down the target quite comprehensively despite losing a couple of wickets right at the end.
Yeah, and Capsey, young player in Capsey, 46 from 23 in the chase at Lords. 3 consecutive record crowds for women's T20s in England, so it was like 19,000,
I think for any
20,000,
bilateral,
21,000.
it's got to be for women's bilaterals across the board. I think there's never been a crowd that big for a women's Ashes match in Australia.
Right, sure. So that was great off the field. They celebrated 25 years of the beginning of the women's Ashes before the game at Lords as well, with a number of former players who were in London for that with the MCC, which was pretty cool. I thought. I think they've laid a plaque, haven't they, on the ground there in the Harris Garden or somewhere around the back of the pavilion. So it was a great night for England to perform well. Danny Gibson with the reverse sweep first ball, cool as you like to win the game. And yeah, Capsey, young player on the way through. The fact that Danny White has delivered throughout the course of the series so far. Elise Perry has made runs, but not. She wasn't within striking distance in that first game.
Well, yeah, I mean,
just
at the end, she needed 18 off the last 3 balls, and she hit the last 2 for 6, but couldn't hit the third last one, so they were out of the game at that point. But it was close, but probably looked a little closer than it was, given those last 2 sixes. And Perry's been striking it well. But Megan Schutz looked really off the boil.
Yeah.
Been such a great performer for Australia over a decade and more, but she's lost potency, at least in the 2 outings where England have got her.
Conceded 35 runs in 3 overs at Lords, which for Megan Schutz unheard of given how frugal she's been. She missed the test match as well for the second time in a row against England. She was overlooked for the test side. So Megan Schutz gone from being, routinely ranked as the number 1 bowler in women's cricket, probably alongside Marizanne Kapp. Now Eccleston's obviously the top of all of those charts, but Shoot will have to, reinvent herself. And look, she's never had pace. It's always been about swing and accuracy. So she comes from the previous generation, whereas the next generation, well, it's summed up nicely in who England have chosen to go to in their one-day squad. Not only is Izzy Wong back, but Lauren Filer, who was so impressive in that test match at Trent Bridge a couple of weeks ago. Those two are going to change English women's cricket together because they're both going to be bowling far more quickly than any woman has bowled for England before. By definition, that's going to change the type of cricket that they're able to play.
I think Filer bowled the second fastest recorded delivery by an England woman in the test match. Really put it up the Australians as well. Got Perry couple of times, rushed them with pace. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes, because in a 50-over contest, when you've got more space, like T20 is the most volatile format, you would think the quality of the Australian team is going to tell over 50 overs. It's going to be more of a challenge for England to beat them in 50 overs than it was in 20.
Yeah.
But I'll be interested to see how they set up the team. So Tammy Beaumont back, who doesn't get picked in the T20 team these days, but made a double hundred in the Test match. Danny Wyatt, do they open with her or do they open with Capsey? Because they had Alice Capsey open in 1 game. Before she got injured, and she's the young sort of heavy hitter, but Wyatt's been in such good nick in the T20s and slashing through the offside. So you could play 1 at 7 and 1 opening, or you could flip it. It could work either way, but I just think maybe they will shuffle that. And probably Capsey was supposed to open, but maybe Wyatt does, given how she's played the last couple of weeks.
And also Wyatt's, I think it's like a libero sort of role. She can play anywhere through that lower middle order and have. She did so really well against India a couple of summers ago when she was out of the one-day team, got dropped, came back through the number 6, number 7 finisher role, ended up back at the top of the order. So that merry-go-round for Danny Wyatt continues, but she's the player in form, and I suppose she's the player in possession, having opened in the T20s. I think it's significant that Freya Davies isn't in the one-day squad as well. It probably, again, sort of symbolises the direction of travel for England cricket. I know that Wong hasn't been part of it so far, but Wong and Filer, that's the way they're going. Kate Cross has definitely got a 3 in front of her age. She might be 31 or 32 now. She's taken a big step up in the last couple of years, being the linchpin around the attack, but she won't be around forever. And I'm not trying to pension her off, but just thinking about succession planning for England, having 2 young fast bowlers. And then Lauren Bell, who hasn't got the pace, that's true, but she has got the height and she has got a mean-in swinger. So I think that you're probably looking at the first 2 to bring real change in the way England play, with Bell more in keeping with the previous generation pace-wise, but She's been primed for this over a number of seasons.
And the slower balls, the back of the hand slower
Yes,
ball, she
yes.
bowled so well to close out that T20.
Absolutely.
Lauren Bell. So it's interesting sort of how they'll chop that bowling attack up. How do you fit everybody in? Who do you fit in? Because they've got Capsey, Charlie Dean, Danny Gibson, the 3 all-rounders.
Yeah.
And then they've got Philo, Wong, Bell, Cross, Sarah Glenn as the leg spinner as well.
Funny where Glenn fits in, right? Got great numbers, great T20 numbers, but I sense they don't really trust her in 50 over cricket because she is, like a lot of wrist spinners, and this is fine, she's the kind of wrist spinner who does give you a ball to hit every over, which the chaos of T20, that can kind of suit wrist spinners, as we've seen throughout the life cycle of that format of the game. For whatever reason, in 50 over cricket, if you're inconsistent, you can be milked and really taken apart. So interesting to see where she fits into all of that.
So if England lose a game, they can't get the Ashes back, but they can still lose a game and tie the series, which would really piss off the Australians because they were mad the last time that happened. So there's still, the Australians still have to win the next 2 to make sure that they have to win 2 of the 3 to make sure that they actually win the series outright.
Exactly. Now, this is going back to my long-standing argument about why the points should be, some of them should be odds and evens. They shouldn't all be evens because it does mean that you can have this more straightforward retention. I'm sure with odd numbers and even numbers, you could still have a draw as well. I'm not saying you couldn't have it tied on points, but it's harder to achieve if you're clever about, maybe 5 points for a test win, 2 for a draw, 3 for a one-dayer, 2 for a T20. There are ways of reconfiguring this that means that it's more likely to end up with one side winning outright. And just one other gripe on the way through, by the way, no more Ashes series clashing. No more men's and women's Ashes series being in the same summer. This has been the way for a long time in the multi-format point system that's become, what we've been conditioned to since 2013, 2014. In England, the series have been intertwined. They've stopped doing that in Australia, thankfully, from 2017 onwards, and last time around it was after the men's Ashes. Either do that over here or move it out of the summer. How much better would have the women's Ashes been next year when England's men are playing Sri Lanka and the West Indies, which, with all due respect, it's improbable either of those series are going to be capturing hearts and minds. Whereas if you drop a women's Ashes in that summer, it gets so much more space. The truth is, I've not been able to cover the women's Ashes the way I wanted to because I've got so many different competing interests at the moment with the men's Ashes. You've had a bit more flexibility than me. And I'm quite pissed off about that. Like, I want to be at every major women's match that I can. And it's not about the media necessarily, but patrons who want to go to both, make their way. If you wanted to go to... if you want a ballot ticket for Leeds Day 1, hen's teeth, right? A ballot ticket, which you had to apply for last year, and you get it. That means, by definition, you really couldn't have gone to the Oval for the first T20, even if you're a Londoner.
Unless you did what we had to do, which is
dangerous.
Drive up and get there at 3:30 in the morning and go to the test the next.
Which most people, for good reason, that's not viable. People have other
or
lives.
buy a £600 train ticket.
It's
at
just
8 o'clock the next
So
morning.
I hope the powers that be realise that this is the last time this should ever happen. Women's cricket is more than strong enough to be on its own 2 feet, and it doesn't need the context of a men's Ashes to make it worthwhile as its own real big deal living thing. And I hope that we can get off kilter as soon as possible.
And in fact, it may well be stronger on its own because it would have the air, the oxygen.
Definitely.
As you say.
I'm convinced of this. We've seen it in Australia with the women's Ashes. When it's on its own, it gets a chance. It's got a chance. When it's with the men's running side by side, it is so difficult. There are only so many eyeballs that can follow both at the same time.
Yep. I would like to see something similar. And then, if they split them off, we could have an Ashes every year. Wouldn't that be the dream?
Better than 2 in one summer. I'd rather have one every year than 2 in one summer.
I'm not too sure about that. All right, let us play a game. Let's play a little bit of Nerd Pledge. Nerd Pledge.
I think Peggy just woke up in the next room. So if you really want to give it big, you can. I saw her creep down the stairs. Well, rather, Rach was carrying her down the stairs.
6 months old, she's creeping down the stairs.
She's eating solids. I fed her some sweet potato this morning.
Amazing.
Which is pretty cool.
Well, that makes 2 of us.
Proud dad stuff.
Yeah, good work. Good work, Pex. Join the solid food revolution. Now, Nerd Pledge, it's a game that we play with the lovely people who listen to this show, some of whom decide to be the lifeblood of this program. They fund the show by sending in donations that are very specific amounts of currency. Not normal numbers, they're weird numbers. They're numbers that relate to cricket in some way, and we have to work out what the number means. David Whiteley has sent through $2.24.
I wonder whether this is my old boss, David Whiteley, when I worked in the superannuation sector. It might be, it might not be. He's a cricket nut. He used to listen to you and me on White Line Wireless all those years ago. It could be. If it is you, David Whiteley, I hope you're going well.
Wonder if it's any relation to Brett Whiteley, the great Australian painter.
Well,
could be.
I doubt it, given that David's a palm, but still.
Well, I'm not saying that your David Whiteley is related to Brett Whiteley, but I'm saying that if it's not your David Whiteley, it could be a different David Whiteley.
Noted.
Who's into, I don't know, big canvases, you know, Jackson Pollock, Blue Poles, all that kind of stuff, Whitlam era things. Now, David Whiteley has sent through a brief clue. You don't have to send through a clue with your number, but you can. And this says, this number relates to a bloke who understood real pressure. Well, that means one thing to you and one thing to me, I'm sure, Adam Collins.
Yeah, well, a bloke, somebody understood real pressure. I mean, I don't know. Are you suggesting that I've got someone that must be related to that clue?
No, I'm saying that you would know what that clue means, wouldn't you? Real pressure. Australian cricket. Real pressure.
Real pressure.
Yeah.
Why am I not? If you're saying it in such an assumed way,
Yeah.
I'm looking at you blankly.
Real pressure is having a Messerschmitt up your
Oh,
arse.
real pressure. Real pressure is okay.
Keith Miller, who was a fighter pilot before he was an Australian cricketer.
Quite embarrassing that I haven't immediately reached for that.
I thought you would have. I thought that would be.
Yeah.
I mean, you know it.
I know
as soon as
it.
I've said it. You know.
I know it. Yeah.
It's in the cultural lexicon. That quote when he was asked about pressure on the cricket field and expressed a view that it didn't exist because cricket was just about having a good time. So we've talked about Keith Miller before. I can't remember exactly which episode, but maybe in the last 6 months, I did quite an extensive Keith Miller bit.
Might have been around the time of the King's coronation. I seem to recall there was
a bit of Princess Margaret
bit of Princess
crossover.
Margaret stuff, material.
That's the version of Mambo No. 5 that Keith Miller wrote. A bit of, a little bit of. 1, 2, 3, 4,
It's one
5.
of the great Twitter comedian videos. Can't remember her name, but she's a genius. She goes, "It's the face of the girlfriend when listening to Lou Bega's." I've got a new song for you. And she's Monica, the first one, and her face, the blood drains out of her face by the end of this. A little bit of tea, that's what I need.
I know we've talked about Lou Bega on the show before, probably more than he deserves. In the vein of the fact that 20 years after that song, he released a mashup song with Scatman Johns and the Scatman.
He was also on Test Match Special a couple of years ago because he famously, Mambo No. 5 was the Channel 4 theme music for cricket. Mark Nicholas tells that story wonderfully on Calling the Shots. Find it in the feed. Dig it out. But no, so I think he did a rounds of the press box like maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Wow.
In retrospect.
I'm disappointed I was not there that summer.
I think he's German, isn't he?
He's not German, but he lives in Germany.
Okay.
Or I don't think he's German by nationality. Maybe he is.
I'll do a bad job of
He is
explaining
German.
this, but the guy that found U2 and Mark Nicholas were sitting on the couch, like thinking of music to play to this Channel 4 coverage, and then he pulled the record out and goes, "What about this?" and put it on, and one thing led to another. And Mark Nicholas is like, "That's it.
Right.
That's the song.
Right.
That's what's going to be."
And I think Lou Bega went to Miami and heard the sample for that song and went, "I'm going to write a hit out of this," and then basically started pretending that he was Cuban, even though he's actually German. That's when he put the hat on, and he was like, he didn't explicitly say that he was Cuban, but he just kind of gave the impression of being Cuban to the point that all worked. Anyway, this is a digression because we're talking about Keith Miller, who we have talked about before. If you don't know about Keith Miller, express pace, top order bat. Gorgeous combination of things. Never really thought of himself as a bowler, didn't really believe that he was a proper bowler, but 170 wickets in 55 tests suggests that was not the case. Fighter pilot in World War II, many brushes with death, survived in a range of ways. And then after the war, he's got this sort of dipping his toes into high-level cricket that's not quite test cricket because he plays in the victory tests that are not official tests. In 46, he's in the services team, the military teams that tour India and then they go around Australia and play sort of fundraising, cheer everybody up games just after the war. As he comes out of the RAF, and then he debuts in actual test cricket in New Zealand in 1946, plays the 46 Seven Ashes, dominates those, plays on the Invincibles tour in 1948 with Bradman, and he's always having trouble with authority. He's always brawling, particularly with Bradman, which is maybe why he gets left off the 49-50 tour of South Africa a few years later when he gets passed over as test captain for Ian Johnston. The 224, though, this is where I was drawn to this. So this is fairly late in the Miller career. March 1955 in Kingston against the West Indies. Decent team, the 3 Ws are playing. Ramadin and Valentine, the spinners, one of our favourite wicket keepers, Dennis St. Eval Atkinson, who was part of that massive 7th wicket partnership. That is still the record, I think, in Test cricket. So the 2 openers make 50s. Miller comes in after that to join Neil Harvey. They both make hundreds. Harvey 133. Miller makes his highest Test score, which is 147. The partnership is 224, which is David Whiteley's number. Australia 515 declared. They set up a massive win and win that match in Kingston. So I'm sure that's where the 224 comes from. But mainly when thinking about Keith Miller now, I just think about Ian Chappell because I know that sometimes it was the complaint that Ian Chappell tells too many stories. He's always drifting off on commentary to tell a story about. Who are the ones he always goes to? He always goes
Les
to
Favell.
Les Favell. He always goes to Lenny Dertanovic. Lenny Pascoe.
Yeah, likes talking about Ian Redpath.
Ian Redpath loves a Redders chat. So we talked about getting to drive around with Jeremy Coney drumming to the Strokes in the car. Like we get to do some fun, cool things in our careers. And I think one of the things that I, one of the bits that I treasure is Ian Chappell's last season doing commentary. He was back on the ABC for the previous Ashes in Australia when I was doing the last 3 of those tests, and so I got to do commentary with Ian Chappell as my special comments guy, which was I feel pretty chuffed about that. But the best bit was in Sydney when it was pissing down rain one day, and there was a whole session and more where we were just sitting around and waiting, and so Andy Zaltzman and I just started asking Ian Chappell questions. And so there's the thing about complaining that he tells too many stories. That's not a problem when you've got nothing to do and you want stories. So for 2 hours, and Zaltzman described this later as a live podcast with an audience of 2, we just pressed buttons on the Chappell keyboard and we were like, tell us about Neil Harvey. Tell us about Keith Miller. Tell us about Don Bradman. And he would tell a 20-minute story with impeccable recall of every conversation. He'd be like, it was a Sunday, it was about 24 degrees, it was beautiful blue skies that day, and I was walking down from Mossman to,
It reminds me of our Paul Kelly interview last year.
Yeah. I mean, but remarkable recall. And he talked about getting to know Keith Miller when he was living in Adelaide, Nugget, as Chappell would describe him. And
the golden nugget.
And so wandering, going over to Miller's place over the years and getting to know him better and getting advice from him, and how he said, when I didn't know him so well, he described Bradman as that little bastard. And when I got to know him better, he described him as, fill in a different word for that particular. So Miller, a man of forthright opinions and who got up the nose of authority and got offside with them. But I reckon that 224 for David Whiteley is about the partnership that he had in Jamaica with Neil Harvey in 1950. Can't remember what year I said it was. 1955.
Okay. That suits us very nicely. If you want to contribute to what we do here on the show in a practical way, patreon.com/the final word. That link is in the show notes, right alongside the link to the live show at the Phoenix in Soho. Both of those will be there. All you need to do is click through. Very straightforward. Patreon.com/the final word. You can join our Discord channel where, as we've said on the daily shows, you can hang out with other like-minded final word types in that lovely forum there, and it will get you a half-price ticket to watch Stephen Finn go through his paces with Jeff and me on stage at the Phoenix on the 26th of July. Getting quick, because I suspect these tickets, well, they are limited by definition because it's a venue, and it's going to be amplified throughout social media and on the Lord's Tabs pages and all of that, and they've got a big network. So if you're keen to come, please get in quick. Do it today.
Yeah, do it on day one. That'll be the safest way. It's not that huge a venue. All right, let's take a break, and then it'll be India in the West Indies.